Hi guys, today we're going to talk about the nervous system anatomy and the physiology of the nervous system. We're going to go over 5 simple concepts. And when I talk about the nervous system, it's kind of an oxymoron when I say simple because it really is a complex system. And when we look at what it does, how it controls the body, our movement, our thoughts, our emotion, it's all quite amazing. And I want to break it down in a couple ways. So we're going to look at the peripheral nervous system and we're going to look at the central nervous system. The central nervous system is quite simply the brain and the spinal cord. And I say simply tongue-in-cheek. Now, the peripheral nervous system is everything else. That includes what communicates with your arms, your legs, and your organ systems that reside within your chest. Now, your cranial nerves are part of the central nervous system, and that includes things like your senses, primarily. And your sight is a really big one that I like to talk about. Now, when we look at these two systems in play, both of them are necessary for the body to properly function. And so the first part we want to talk about is, well, what's the communication pathways look like? How does that work? Well, a nerve impulse is a chemical reaction. So when they talk about your electrolytes, that's why it's really, really important to maintain a balance in them. And so your brain will send messages to your body on how to function. Everything that we're talking about right now is brought up in the central nervous system, the ability to think within the brain, executed through the muscles of the face, and it comes out through the sound made by the lips and the movement of the mouth. So that's just a simple part of it. Now, a more complex thought about how the brain controls the peripheral nervous system is your ability to close your eyes and touch your nose, or to do things of that action. Your body has to actively, and by body, your brain has to actively talk and communicate between your arm, the muscles within your arm, and the sensory component of your fingertips. Now, I bring up a couple concepts there. Your arm moving, that's motor skills. Your finger touching it, that's a sensory skill. That's being able to sense that you've touched your nose and know what's going on. So that's a further breakdown within the nervous system. And to make it even more amazing, your nervous system, central nervous system, breaks down into your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. Now, how do you guys know this? You've definitely learned about them, you just don't know it. Your parasympathetic is your ability to, quote unquote, rest and digest. So this is when you feel like you're not on guard, when you feel relaxed, when you have no worries or concerns. That's your parasympathetic system. That's hanging out with friends. That's spending time with your children. That's in play. Now, let's look at the sympathetic system. This is the fight or flight. Now, conceptually, if we say, hey, if I have a bear chasing me, I'm going to run away. The blood from my body is going to push to my muscles, away from my brain, and I'm going to run as fast as I can. Now, it also shows up on the road when people get upset with road rage and things like that. Like, they're starting to try to fight and they don't want to. Now, those aren't great versions that we see of ourselves, but they do exist. And it's important to understand that the central nervous system breaks down into 2 additional systems because those both are in play in our everyday life. For example, if we look at organ tissue in the brain and how that happens, the organ tissue itself is able to give a response back to the brain. And so I'm going to talk to us specifically about the heart right now. So if I'm in a fight for my life, my brain will tell my heart to push all the blood to my extremities. We're not worried about digesting food. We're not worried about reproducing. All we care about is, can we get air? Can we get the blood to the muscles? And can we fight to get away from this? And it's amazing what the body can do. Anyone who's been in a severe injury, whether it's anything from a soldier, someone in a car accident, or you accidentally cut yourself, there's that first initial part of shock where you look at yourself and say, did that really just happen? And then you assess the injury, and depending on the individual, some people may faint, some people may go into action, and some people may yell for help. All those are responses on how your body does it. Now, that's how the body will respond to kind of an impact that way. Now, going back to the heart, that heart can also say, all right, I'm overworked. We've got to cause those muscles to set down. Otherwise, we're going to damage the heart. So the body will start to relax. It'll calm itself down, hoping that you've gotten away from your threat. So that's a really big part of how that organ tissue works with the brain and vice versa. Now, let's look at that system and kind of how it overall works. The brain is the control center. All right, so let's take it from the brain itself. You've got this big mass of gray matter. It breaks itself down and it allows itself to work central nervous system, and it works with the peripheral nervous system. So those are the ways that we move and the way that our spine and everything responds. That central nervous system then breaks down to how we operate. Are we in fight or flight, or are we relaxing? So that's why it's so critical on how the brain works. Now, if we break the brain down even further, it controls things like voluntary movement, the ability to stand, the ability to walk. Like, all these are critical for the brain and how it functions. And now, how do we know how the brain is functioning, if it's optimally functioning or if it's not? First and foremost, I like to talk about is brain fog. Anyone who's been like, man, I don't really know. I can't really think. I can't remember my words. Simple facts I used to remember, I can't remember them, but it's only happening for a day or two. Well, you got brain fog. Well, how did that happen? Is it an adrenal function issue, which is an endocrine component? Could it just be a simple bad dietary component where you didn't feed the brain the proper energy? Because the brain consumes a vital amount of energy. It takes a lot to go through thought. It takes a lot of calories to be able to think and move and process and run the system of the human body itself. And then when all that's going well, we can go through and move a little bit forward and look at how the body actually functions with the nervous system fully in play. So signs of it being out of balance. One example of that is anxiety. And here's how I'm going to proposition this. Have you ever taken a test and had butterflies leading up to the test? You know, that sensation where your stomach is fluttery, you get nervous and you get anxious because you don't want to fail the test. You weren't afraid someone was going to eat you. You're afraid of that test. You didn't want to fail. That's a perfect example of the body working with the parasympathetic system and how your body responds accordingly to it. And so that's really, really unique. And what happens there is the brain is getting concerned, so it shows up in the abdomen. So you don't really have a sore stomach. You don't really have a stomach that's not feeling well, but that's how it presents itself. When you go through and look at your overall movements, how you train yourself, all these components are taking place because what the brain is telling you to do. A sports injury is a very common one that shows the peripheral nervous system. Again, that's the nervous system that controls the arms and the legs and all of those parts. It's just showing a sign of failure in it. A common example of that is a rolled ankle or a sprained ankle. We see that a lot with our basketball players and our soccer players, our football players, athletes that require their ankles to cut, pivot, and turn. So they're operating under a lot of stress, in a stressful environment, in a competitive environment, and the brain isn't able to keep up with it, and they step wrong and they roll and damage an ankle. And now they have to rebuild all that tissue. So what is pain? Pain is an indicator that says, okay, we're done here, stop, it hurts, I don't want to do any further damage. And so that's another interesting sign of, how the nervous system works. Then last but not least, a very simple one I want to talk about is headaches. Headaches can be caused by the simple impact that you've deprived your brain of blood supply, irritated nerves that go around the brain or around the skull, and those show up as an improper function. And so the brain has to calibrate all that. The nervous system has to calibrate all that. So when we look kind of at the 5 components that I really want you to be able to look at with the nervous system, it breaks down very simply to this. The brain breaks down into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And then after that, the central nervous system breaks down into the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, the rest and digest and the fight or flight. All those are very, very important. The peripheral nervous system will give the brain signs and symptomatology that there's something wrong with the body. The body will then respond accordingly. And all above all, which is quite amazing, is the brain can decide based on emotion to have a sensation within the body, i.e. anxiety. So with all that being said, it's very, very critical that you take care of your nervous system. It's very critical that you take care of your body, but especially the nervous system. Make sure to properly fuel it. Make sure that you get proper movement to help sustain it. And most importantly, make sure that you're getting adjusted. So thank you for your time and thank you for joining us on today's discussion. Have a great day.